Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's Blab, which is what is the impact of digital on sales and salespeople? I'm going to allow Nick and Ian to introduce themselves very briefly, and then we're going to get stuck into the debate. So, Nick, if you'd like to give 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Ayton, and I've been in sales and running sales organizations for 30 years, primarily in large-scale IT services businesses. Most recently, the last 3 or 4 years, I've done sales turnarounds, and I've been focusing on digital in terms of digital operating models and helping organizations come to terms with the world. So that's me.
Excellent. Ian.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Ian Moyse. I've, like Nick, been in sales about 30 years as well, sales leadership for about 25 of those, last 10 in cloud and software as a service type. And I've spent a lot of time working with, both on a consulting basis and business, on electronic channels, social selling, how the whole dynamic is changing of the sales world.
Excellent. And I'm Marcus Cauchi from Sandler Training. I also have been in sales for around 30 years. So it seems that we're all very long in the tooth. My background is selling into large corporates from an SME standpoint. So very keen to engage in this conversation because naturally the world of selling is changing dramatically as technology and culture changes as a result of the digital onslaught. So without any further ado, let's kick off with the first question. Nick, what is digital?
Well, it's a topic that I get asked all the time because I think digital is one of the most confusing titles, if you like, and it's bandied about by management as it appears these days as the answer to everything. You know, we're going to go digital. So what is it? Well, for me, I see digital as a transportation layer to help organizations reach customers in entirely different ways. But I also see it on enabling the customer to reach the organization to consume products and services in different ways. So for me, digital is about an enabling transportation layer for both the customer and the organization to reach each other.
Very interesting. Ian, what's your definition of digital?
Yeah, I'll add on to Nick's. On top of that, what I've spent heavily time in is around the social selling and how customers and salespeople and organizations are interacting on multiple levels. And the misunderstanding, I guess, that social selling replaces the old selling world. This is what it's going to be and the old one's gone, which is not the case at all.
Okay, that's going to be an interesting debate because I know certainly Nick has views depending on the sector. My own interest in social selling has burgeoned over the last 10 years. It started on Academy, moved on to LinkedIn, and I've generated millions of pounds worth of business over the years through the use of digital technologies. And my general view is that it's an evolution rather than a revolution. And the problem is that I think so few salespeople have really embraced the reality of the changing marketplace. Now, Nick, over to you in terms of why we're wrong and why it is a revolution.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. As always, give me the interesting one. Look, I think if you look at the impact of what's going on out there, the world of the customer is a changing world. Customers are better informed, they're more savvy. Behavior-wise, they're used to consuming lots of different things online. They use Amazon, they use eBay, they use all sorts of different channels, and they're more comfortable with that. They're more comfortable with online banking, they're more comfortable giving over their personal information, they're more comfortable with doing transactions. So you know, the whole world of the customer is changing. And what they're demanding now is an experience. They want a good experience, and they want it to be consistent at every touch point that the organization goes to market. So if your company is selling products and services, and you do have a traditional sales force, but you've also got all the other channels as well, customers are looking for consistency. And they're also looking for the opportunity to understand the sort of outcome they're going to get. And if they don't get it, they're quite happy to go somewhere else where they know they can get it. So, and that used to be very much around, you know, the small ticket stuff and where people are going around and consuming small ticket items. But even more so now, it's come to the big stuff where, you know, the larger companies selling larger scale products and services, their customers know what to expect and what they want.
That makes sense. Ian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd add to that immediacy and expectation. I think we're seeing I always talk about the buyer dynamic absolutely has changed, and customers are far more educated than they've been before. So often when you engage with them, they're 60 to 70% through the buyer journey, and your chance to influence has already gone to effect. So you often I get people saying, well, we don't get customers doing that. No, because they're not reaching you, because they've already qualified you out, but you just don't know it. And I think that's the real difference that we're seeing, is the customer is making decisions before you even get to them, if you get to them at all. And what I always talk about as well is the millennials and the Z generation. This is taken for granted with them, right? They expect everything, immediacy, online, any device, anywhere. I can research, I can self-serve, but I could also reach out if I want to. And I think that's where I've personally seen the discrepancy. You've got the fully online electronic businesses who, if you actually do want to talk to them, it's incredibly difficult, and they make it difficult. And then you've got the flip side of the traditional bricks and mortar, traditional business who, in going electronic, and interesting, I did one at the weekend tweeting about something, a complaint of a pack of crisps thing we got. I just tweeted, I'll tweet this. They've just responded this morning. Now, at least they've responded. I see many where there is no response at all. So they have a digital route to market to engage with customers, but they don't actually engage or listen.
At the risk of sounding like a total Luddite, what is Z generation?
So that's the generation following the millennials, if you haven't read about it. I know I don't nickname these, and I think I'm sure there's another name coming along. The millennials is what's coming into the business. The Zs is the following that. The youngsters we're seeing now who haven't grown up into that business. But if you look at it, kids have all got their mobile phones. And we see the stats. More people are accessing the web via phones than the traditional desktop that we're all used to.
Well, one of the areas that Nick and I have been discussing, and has been an area of constant fascination for me, is the long tail. I've been reading up about it for years, and recognizing just how powerful. If you look at Amazon's sales, they sell more one-off books than they do any of the blockbuster titles, and that generates more revenue for them than any of the Harry Potters or whatever. And I'm curious how, as a salesperson, we can tap into that, because it's really about being efficient, being effective, using this new culture and this new technology. Nick, thoughts?
Well, look, what you're talking about is addressable markets for me, and that breaks down into two sort of debates, really. The first debate is that I would say is the conventional business operating models are unable to reach the entire market. So digital companies, if they're built by design and they are built to deliver a specific outcome and experience, they are able to reach the entire market, not only the top end where the higher margin, larger clients may be, but the entire market right down to the long tail. And there you have it. The addressable market is it's not about a scale game anymore. It's not about being the biggest and the strongest and having more, assets and more salespeople. That game's gone now. It's about reaching the entire market in such a way where your acquisition cost, your cost to acquire a customer, benefits from the economies of scale. So these big organizations, they really do inhibit their ability to reach the market. And here's the example. I've just, really upset quite a lot of people in the pension space, because I developed a self-service pension platform. Now, what I would call the dinosaur fat cats, which are Aviva and Standard Life and Scottish Life and others, they can only reach about 14 million people. And their acquisition cost is about £200 to acquire a member, which takes them 10 years to get their money back. My platform, the customer acquisition cost was 55p, but also I could reach 40 million people, which is the entire market on PAYE plus 5.4 million self-employed. So their addressable market was actually inhibited by the fact they had a conventional operating model that meant they had to make a certain amount of profit and margin, which meant they couldn't reach the tail, nor did they really want to. So I would challenge that most organizations, if you really want to go digital and take advantage of what's there, you have to think in terms of changing your operating model so you are able to reach a far greater proportion of that market.
Excellent. Ian, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's about, to add to what you're saying there, Nick, I think it's about picking the right method of reaching the right type of customer. You know, I've heard talk about managed and unmanaged customers, for example, the long tail being the unmanaged. And I think digital really gives an option to reach that mass market, as you say, but you're still going to have at the top tier those customers that need management. The insurer you described there, the pensions, the larger, if you go to the company pensions, I don't think they're going to just sign up through that, maybe down the line through more maturity. But what I see right now is there's still a need at the solution sale at the top end for whatever to engage. But it's how you, I agree, it's how you serve that long tail, where I've transformed a lot of sales teams where they've been trying to address the long tail because they're easier. The smaller customer, they'll talk to you, but the transactions are small and they're costly. And what you really want to do is spend that time on the larger transaction, where one transaction might equal 50, 100 of the smaller ones. So I think it's using the right medium to market for the right type of customer. I think it's a blend we're going to see, depending on the type of business and service you're providing.
Can I just comment on that, Mark? I mean, I sort of with you on that, Ian. I think the experience was when I set up this new pension provider, the original play was to have a direct sales force, which sort of supports what you're saying. But when you've got an organisation with a certain set of number of employees and a certain size, they do expect somebody to turn up at the front door and have a conversation. But then again, you know, there is an element of larger customers that actually do prefer to serve themselves and they don't want to see a salesman. But that's about gaining their trust. If their initial contact with you is a good one and they see some value from that contact and it's all going well, even the big ones are quite happy to consume what you have to sell using a platform. And they may not necessarily want to see a salesman.
Okay.
I guess you get a lot depends on whether procurement in an organization is very dominant versus you can actually get through to talk to the head of the business unit that wants to make the decision. So I agree with you, Ian. There's a lot of variables in all of that, but by and large, behavior is changing.
No, I totally agree. And I think markets, as you're describing there, and I talk about this a lot, are being disrupted. And I don't think we've seen even the beginning of the disruption that's really going to come. I think we're just seeing the beginnings.
I think we've seen it in travel, certainly. I'm curious where things like banking are going. Nick recently posted a fascinating article on some disruptive movements in the banking space. And you know, the general inertia there and the poor service that one's received over the years, I think that's a market that's absolutely ripe for being turned completely on its head. Your thoughts?
Well, Metro Bank's already doing it, I guess, right? They're an example of coming in and doing something differently from a clean slate. And I think when you come at things from I always say to people, it's easy to talk about what would you do today in your business if you started again? Would you do it the way you're doing it? And the reality is probably not. The challenge, I think, is existing businesses to change. If you're a new entrant, look at Netflix, all the different ones we've seen, Uber, the disruptors, a lot of them are new entrants. Nick, you were describing that. I think for existing businesses to change, that's where the real hardship is.
Fair point.
I'm with you, Ian, actually. And on Friday, I'm talking at the Chief Digital Officers Summit. And one of the topics I shall be debating and discussing is that I'm one of these people that I do not believe that digital transformation is possible. And the way I describe it, it's like trying to dry clean Marcus's suit while he's wearing it, and also then trying to steam press his suit without burning him. You know, two things get you with transformation. First of all, is culture will defeat you time and again, and the second thing is management is not willing to cannibalize its existing revenues.
Yeah.
And there's the Sony example. You know, in the 90s, they were the biggest manufacturer of MP3 players. They had 60% of the music artists through their record labels, and yet they let Apple come onto the pitch and change the dynamic on the way in which people consume music.
We've had a response from Excelia Limited. They're saying banks don't want to change, and the FCA is blocking new entrants. How long can they possibly block when there's groundswell of pressure against that?
Well, the interesting stat that's coming out at the moment is they reckon so we look at UK banking, for example, you know, there's 5, maybe 6 major players, and I don't see Metro as a major player. I see it actually as yeah, we can talk about Metro later. But they reckon that the current retail banks, they got 45% of their current account customers at risk by the challenger banks. So whether it's Moyse or Mondo or Seco Bank or Number 26 or Fidor, you know, all of these challenger banks are coming in. Now, I don't believe that the FCA is restricting anything here. We have actually quite liberal laws here, and you get quite a lot of help from regulation, both the conduct and the prudential authority. The difficulty comes, in my view, is if you ask people to design a bank and they happen to be ex-bankers, they'll design it, and the first question they'll ask is, what about regulation? What about compliance? What about risk? But you ask the 3 of us that don't know much about banking how we design a new bank. The first question we will ask is, how do we reach the customer? How do we solve the problems that we're all frustrated with, that I can't get a balance in real time? When I go into a shop, I want to know, when I've spent £200, I want to see right on my phone how that's impacted the balance. You know, so I don't believe regulation is inhibiting the banks. I think it's the entrepreneurial thinking, and the worst thing you can do is ask an ex-banker to design a new bank.
Well, again, from a psychological standpoint, this is very true. There was some research done back in the 80s on why people should or shouldn't buy a VCR. And depending on the question that was posed, first of all, which was come up with reasons to buy one and come up with reasons not to. And then people stick with their current mode of thinking. So I think one of the big challenges here is to think differently. And I think from a sales point of view, one of the big challenges is how do we get out of those old bad habits, those old lines of thinking that tell us sales is done in one particular way or another. You know, for the last 12, 13 years, I've been doing my best to disrupt the way people sell. And I have to say, it's been a bit of an uphill struggle in many cases because people are quite resistant. They're comfortable with what they know. And our number one driver as human beings is to look for what feels familiar. So I'm really curious about how as salespeople and as sales organizations, we can adapt so that we don't scare the living bejesus out of people by our new behaviors. Because I remember probably 10, 15 years ago when caller ID started kicking in and you phoned Domino's Pizza or someone like that and they knew your name. That was kind of spooky. So I'm just curious, Ian, what do you think salespeople need to do in order to modify their behavior so that they don't frighten the customer, but they really do build trust quickly, engage with them effectively, and engage with them in a way that helps them solve their problems?
So I think the first thing is understanding all these new tools and approaches are part of the tool set. They don't replace the fundamental skills and approaches we've had before, but they change the kit bag you've got. And I watch people misuse them. If you ask most people social selling, say, well, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and that's it. And then what you'll see is the behavior where they may get a connection with someone on LinkedIn. The next thing, and I see the joke messages people posting all the time of, thanks for connecting to me. And then the next message I got was a full-on sales pitch. Yeah. You know, this whole dynamic is, and I've tried to mentor people this, it's a slowly. People don't expect to have you approach them hard. So if you tweet something and they retweet it, you don't jump in and immediately phone them and try and do a sales pitch. That's not what they expected. You know, you need to interact, and it's a much different approach than we've seen historically. And then you've got to be sensitive, I think, far more sensitive than you've been before, because I've seen, and I'm sure you've all seen it, you get a lot of interesting reactions on social, because it's like, I describe it like people in the car. If I was talking to both of you now, it's great, we're all friendly, and other people on the line. Someone at the car at the roundabout, suddenly you're a different character, right? And people become often a different character online because it's faceless, emotion, and it's like you're in the car. So you've got to be conscious of that. It's very easy to annoy people. I'm trying to avoid using the real words I want to use, but you can really rile people very quickly online, whereas in person, they'd feel the emotion, probably wouldn't react like that.
I've been guilty of all of the crimes above, so I'm speaking with a better personal experience. One thing that fascinates me about both of you is you really do appear to be very potent in terms of your use of Twitter. Now, LinkedIn, in the last couple of months, I've managed to generate 11, 12 bits of business off. But Twitter's always been a bit of a mystery to me. Nick, you say that you've been generating a lot of leads through Twitter. Do you mind just sort of opening up the debate in terms of how to engage on Twitter effectively for a gnarly old salesperson like me?
Well, I think I sort of I agree with what Ian was saying. Is there's a whole bunch of tools and assets out there that salesmen have to tune into with a digital context. So for me, it's all about gaining insight and to get that little bit of extra information about your prospect or your customer that maybe your competition, doesn't have. So you're looking for a way in, and quite often the way in is through the soft areas, not necessarily the business areas. You can find a way in by identifying with people who are parts of different communities, different groups, they have different interests and so on, maybe sport or politics or wine or what have you. But the thing about Twitter, I mean, all the different social media platforms, for me, they all have a different purpose and a different role to play. The key thing about Twitter, I think, is Twitter is quite misunderstood by the majority of people. They just think it's a bit like Facebook, where you publish your social life and, it's all about friends and parties and going on holiday and putting your pictures up. But you can use it for so many other different purposes that are more business related. But Twitter, I actually make more meetings via Twitter than I do from any other platform, and the reason is that if you listen and you tune into the debate and you tune into individuals and communities. So I follow insurtech and fintech, the two areas that I'm very interested in, and I follow the people and I get involved in the conversation, and then eventually, as Ian said, they become aware of you. Then you can private message them about something you agree or fundamentally disagree. And you can suggest you can take the conversation offline or take it further. So I did that with the CEO of a very large insurance company the other day. He was putting stuff out there, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't agree. His name was Philip. I don't agree, Philip, for these reasons. And we had a bit of online sort of stuff. And then I just messaged him a few days later and said, well, why don't we continue the conversation over a cup of coffee? He said, they'd love to, But it was actually that I tuned into what he was thinking about, and it was a very, as Ian said, it wasn't just an off-the-cuff remark. It was a very tuned and a measured response to get a conversation going.
So a lot of the stuff I see on Twitter is people like me broadcasting their content and using it as another megaphone, if you like. You're talking about a dialogue. Ian, what sort of dialogues are you looking at when you're trying to engage?
Yeah, so there's you absolutely got it, Nick. So there's a number of different ways. So let me give you some examples. So firstly, a number of salespeople I speak to say I don't have a Twitter account because I don't want to post stuff and whatever. And I would say to them, yeah, but that means you can't listen either. If nothing else, get on there and, as Nick mentioned there, at least listen. You may not decide to engage. I think you'll get pulled in anyway, because if you listen to something and you've got something to say, naturally you'll get the voice up. But at least listen. But it's about engagement. So and it isn't just about, as Nick described, conversations. How do you get that engagement? So I was trying to get into a particular account. I found out about this new CIO, found out her background and something about it, and tweeted something relevant and included her using her @ address symbol on Twitter, just included her in it. She retweeted it. Now, you don't then jump in, like I mentioned on LinkedIn, and phone her or suddenly start, but that's the first step, right? This is a slowly catchy monkey a lot of the time. So Nick, you said there it was a few weeks. Sometimes it can be far longer, but if you get into the account that way, because you slowly, they notice you, and I've had this, and then they follow you, and that individual then a few weeks later, through a bit of engagement, chose to follow me. Again, you don't just jump in like a bull in a china shop, but you're slowly moving in a progressive place to get to that conversation. Now, I've had people say to me, well, if she's retweeted you, phone her. Why haven't you phoned her? Right, the doors are going to go straight up again. Right, you haven't earned the right to engage, and you've got to gauge it very carefully. But this is a medium that I find most salespeople aren't using, and most senior decision makers, and I've spoken to many in the past 6 months to a year, where they've said, you're lucky to be here, because we get, and it varies on industry and type and all the rest of it, but I've had them say we get 50 cold calls a week trying to sell us something. So 200 a month. And that was an average size business, not a big corporate. So if you start looking at that, just going in through the front door is not going to work anymore, because you're just one of the noise. You've got to find a different way to engage, that they choose to start to engage with you. And it doesn't feel like sales. One more example, if I can, in 10 seconds. I saw someone on their LinkedIn profile had something on there, interested in being on boards of charities and in welfare, interest in kids, animals, it's sort of a usual thing you see at the bottom of the profile. So I happened to be on the board of Bike Night in Thames Valley. So I reached out to them on that alone. I noticed this on your profile. I'm involved with this thing. I wonder if there's worth a conversation. I got an immediate response. This is someone, an IT director at a major brand company. We then had a good 30-minute conversation around that. And at the end, I judged there was enough rapport to say, by the way, now I've got you. Do you mind if, and he laughed, and then we had a conversation and booked a meeting. But I didn't go in through the front door that we traditionally have done. And I think that is failing increasingly, and it's really hard.
Thomas Farrell is talk about social media being like meeting people down the pub. You don't just walk up to somebody and say, Nick, do you fancy one? Because you're going to get a slap. And the problem is that there is a tendency to rush. I think one of the key takeaways from today's debate is slow the sale down to speed the sale up. The mistake so many salespeople make, whether they're doing it through digital, through social, or through face-to-face, is they're in too much of a hurry to try and get to that close. And in fact, I think one of the key things that I'm picking up from today is listen for insight, not just understanding. Would that be a fair observation, Nick?
Well, I just, I would agree with that. But I've just been listening to what Ian's saying, and, it occurs to me that there's lots of other ways of using, for example, Blab and this kind of forum, where you broaden social media in terms of, you have a conversation around developing content. You have a conversation around a product launch or giving people insight into your company event. You live stream it, you broadcast it, you get interaction going. You invite people in to just get one foot in the tent, and eventually a leg, half a body, and then they're in. And I agree with Ian. It's a progression of because how do you get heard in a digital world? How do you get heard? Because everyone's at it. Everyone's got these tools, and Mr. Custom is being blindsided by all sorts of unwanted attempts to get their attention. You flip that on its head. You just invite the customer to engage with your organization or brush up against it in lots of different ways to consume what they want or get something they want out of it. So you invite them in, but they might want to listen and put their head through the tent and just look at you first for a while. And then they might say, yeah, okay, I'll listen to this one for a bit. So that's why if you think of the people who are really good at this at the moment, you look at Accenture. Accenture really use social media cleverly. They've got lots of different platforms, lots of different names out there, but they put loads of content out there. McKinsey have started doing it as well by putting actually half-written reports or summaries of reports, some really valuable stuff, because they're showcasing what they can do for you. So they're just trying to pull you in a little bit. They're giving you something, a bit of value for nothing, and then the customer can think, cool, these guys are interesting, or they're worth having or watch, as Ian said, a watching brief, and then over time, you start pulling them into your world, and then you can get a conversation with them almost at will.
So in that case, what are your tips in terms of creating maximum engagement? So Nick, let's start with you.
Well, look, every sector, it doesn't matter what sector it is, will have their hot topics. And this is the one thing you can use social media for. You can tune into the hot topics, the hot debate, and some of your customers may be on there sharing their views. If it's a chief information or chief technology officer, maybe out there offering their views. But quite a lot of your clients are not going to be on there offering their views. But nevertheless, the hot topics will be the hot topics, whether it's the analysts or the research organizations, they'll all be talking about. So the big one at the moment is Ethereum, of course. And, you know, it's superseded Bitcoin, it's superseded blockchain. Now everyone's talking about Ethereum, which is like putting the internet on Viagra, frankly. It makes the internet one big virtual machine, which is a real game changer. But that's a key debate. And everyone's trying to think about blockchain. What does it mean to my business? What does digital mean to my business? And what does Ethereum mean to my business? So you join the debate. And then as an organization, to answer the question, Marcus, you start giving your organization's perspective on those key topics. And hopefully you try and put a slightly different spin on things. So you stand out from the crowd. But you've got to join the mainstream conversations, because otherwise customers will think you're not on it and your organization's not on it, and you don't have anything to say. Actually, having nothing to say in many respects is worse than having too much to say.
That's a fair point. Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in businesses, the other thing to consider, and Nick, you were talking there from the company point of view, is social advocates. Is, you know, people like to engage with people, and you'll have good expertise in your business and good thought leadership, like Nick's there on the fintech side. You'll have people understand stuff, but often they're hidden away in the business. Is, can you give them a voice on social to help represent and add value from your company perspective, rather than what I see with a lot of organizations, they, depending on size, either they have a social team, and that's where everything sits and it's all controlled, and everything they come out with is marketing messages. It's not value to the client. It's, we're trying to sell to you. It's not what these mediums are there for, and it's not what the customer's looking to digest it for. Is, don't give me an advert in one of these social platforms. And, you know, can you get these social advocates and experts to do the thought leadership pieces? And often many of them in your business have good voice to say, and they will engage customers, but it's then not the corporate messaging. And smaller businesses I've seen often go and get an external company to do it, who know nothing about their sector or their expertise, and yet the MD or someone, because he's frightened of the technology, you talk to them, they've got really good insights and thoughts, and they're describing things like Nick is about a particular sector, but they're not sharing that. They're delegating it to someone else because this is just an electronic medium. So marketing and this external agency can do this. They're missing the whole boat. Customers want, the word we're using is insight. They want to engage with people they can learn something from and gain benefit from. And off the back of that, your benefit can be getting engagement with that customer or that prospect customer.
Dan Gaskett from Acclaim Environmental has made a couple of interesting points. The first one is that bonding and rapport appears to be absolutely at the heart of the whole social selling and digital process, just as with traditional direct face-to-face selling. And he's asked the question, how do you start that hot topic? I think, Nick, you've already alluded to listen to what's already going on. Do you have any advice if you've spotted the next big thing in terms of trying to generate the noise around that to get the next hot topic out there in the marketplace?
Well, it's pretty fundamental, actually, and it's a good question. You know, how do you get, you know, the topic aired? Where does it come from? Look, you know, I've always treated selling as a profession, as I'm sure we all do, and on that basis, I go heavy research. So if I'm talking to a client, I go heavy on the client sector. So I want to know the rules of engagement in that sector. I want to know the key players. I want to know the regulation and. So you go heavy. Once you're tuned into social media, then you get to understand the topics that are most widely discussed into that sector. So, you know, I'm just trying to think about, okay, for instance, so investment bankers at the moment are, they're not particularly well liked. They're now ranking way above estate agents as some of the worst liked people. But the point is that they're all wrestling with blockchain. And what blockchain is basically a distributed ledger system. So for an investment banker, what it means is that they don't have to have anti-money laundering checks and KYC. The whole thing, centralized control and regulation, goes away. And potentially blockchain has the potential of taking 60-80% of cost out of the back office. So investment banks are trying to understand what that means. And so you need to get into that debate, and you, as a vendor or a service provider, you need to give your spin on that, and you need to make it a little bit controversial. Frankly, you need to sort of maybe take a contrarian view, or you take a view that is got a bit of edge to it. That the whole thing is, when I used to teach people to present and do things, the whole point of presenting and the whole point is doing a pitch is to get a reaction. Good or bad, you want to get a reaction. You want to be remembered. It may not be for the suit you're wearing. It may be for the opening comment or the closing comment, or it actually may be for the suit you're wearing. So, be remembered. I mean, Marcus, you're famous for your braces. So, the whole thing is be remembered. So the whole point of getting these hot topics out is that you've got to do your research, you plan, you've got to find Twitter will list the top 100 topics being discussed, and you'll see the amount of volume that's being debated around it. Tune into some of the people, stalk some people, become a social media stalker, stalk your target and see what they're talking about. You don't have to interact, as Ian said, just gauge what they're talking about, and then write an article on Pulse, have a conference, speak at various events, give your opinion, put yourself out there, your company's out there or your organization's out there, give them an opinion to get part of the debate and make it different. And then people will go, oh, these guys see the world a little bit different, they're worth a chat.
Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, a simple hint I'd give to people, a call to action, I guess, from this is a lot of people get hung up on all the technology side, what tools do I use? Simple one in Twitter, lists. As Nick said there, you can follow some people, but you don't have to hit the follow button so they see you follow them. Add them to a list, and I've done this. So you can create, for example, from your drop-down Twitter, a list. You might say financial, in Nick's words there, financial experts or innovators or whatever you want to call it. Add them to it because they'll see they've been added to it. People take notice of stuff around them that's specific to them. So I see people adding me to lists, and you take, oh, what's that called? Oh, such and such experts. Oh, okay, that's quite flattering. Add them to that list. You can then look at everything in that list separate to your tweet feed, so it doesn't engage. And it also sends back a message to them if you've put them into an experts list or something of, oh, that's a nice bit of flattery. And then you can just watch it in nicely grouped together. So you can group you can do tons of lists, and it's nice and manageable and easy to dip in there, have a quick look, skim through when you're having a coffee in the morning, and see, is there any conversation there that I can dip into and comment? And what I've seen with social, and I've self-taught this stuff over the past few years, is one thing begets another. So you may get involved in a conversation. The people in that conversation may then retweet you or follow you. And you can get some quite influential people taking content or comment you've made and sharing it on with their audience. So it isn't just about the person you're targeting or the interaction you have with them. It's what it may beget onwardly. So I've had success things come out of this where I couldn't have planned it. It's because I've engaged, as Nick said, I've shared content and they've shared it on with their audience, and someone from their audience has reached out or followed me. So social, one thing begats another. And I couldn't have planned out 3 or 4 years ago, where I started looking at this much more in depth, some of the contacts I'd have made and targeted to make them. Some of it is going to be accidental. But by engaging and taking part, you create your own luck.
Interesting. Dan's pointed to a feature on Twitter called notifications. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so notifications is where anyone mentions you, includes you in a tweet, retweets you, etc. So it's something to look at and see what engagement you're getting with your content. So if I've tweeted something, notifications, and someone retweets it, it's going to appear in notifications. Or if they respond to the group that I've sent it to, it will appear there. So it's anything that you've been engaged with where it's showing what's happening around you and your ID.
Thank you. Okay, I mean, one observation that I'm taking from today's debate is really about the engagement. It's about the dialogue that happens. It's not just a monologue of an individual being on broadcast. It's very much about creating a two-way flow of conversation. And to do so, you have to attract your target market. You need to stalk them. You need to add them to lists. You need to do your research and track what they're saying or what topics are of interest, what the hot topics trending on Twitter are, and engage there with a bit of an edge and a bit of controversy. Anything else that you can suggest for the audience in terms of creating more engagement? Because that seems to be the way things are moving. If you look at what LinkedIn have been doing in terms of their mobile app, not letting you see the number of views that you're generating on your posts, but only allowing you to see the number of shares, number of likes, and number of comments. So,
I guess,
no, go on.
I guess from my point of view, we've been talking quite a lot about social, and obviously the social impact on sales and as a set of tools and a way of reaching people. But I also think that there's a more fundamental opportunity for the sales organization. I'm pretty hot on sales operating models, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the sales organization as its entirety needs to embrace digital. And the reason for that is that you need to understand every touch point that anybody in your organization has with a customer or potential customer. And most organizations can't do that. You know, they know who's been on the web. They might know which salesman's had a chat, but do they really know when a random customer calls in or somebody from an accounts department chasing a purchase order or an invoice from your customer calls in? You know, every touch point of that customer engagement has to be sensed by the organization, and the sales organization has to be kept informed of that. So this is why conventional business operating models struggle with digital, because they tend to have siloed functions and they don't share information. So my favorite expression when I set my last platform up was all staff know and see all. You know, they are empowered to help that customer experience and that customer journey. And customer journey is a key aspect of digital now, because an organization will expect you to create a journey for them, and an individual will also expect them to do it for you, and very much tailored. We're not talking B2B and B2C. They're very old-fashioned expressions these days. You know, this is about peer-to-peer. People expect an individual experience tailored to their way of doing things, to tailor to what they want, and they expect you to contextualize all that history and all the knowledge about them to engineer that journey so it's the best experience and delivers the best outcome for them. So organizations have to get their head around social touch, you know, as well as human touch and all the other sensory touches when a customer, an organization is engaging with their market.
I think that's an outstanding point. Tell me this then, in terms of how CRM is much reviled, and if you look at the research on, I think it was Siebel years ago, they said 80% of Siebel implementations were viewed as failures by the users. Now that's a pretty damning statement or indictment. Now, in my experience, a lot of people who implement CRM really don't use it effectively, and they certainly haven't embraced all of those different touch points in their CRM model. I'm curious about what we can do in terms of adapting CRM so it really is agile enough to cope with digital.
Well, I mean, my take on that, Marcus, very quickly is that CRM, I mean, most organizations are worried about how much the license costs, for one, and they only allow salespeople, pre-sales people, and one or two other people to have access to it. Maybe the boss to look at the pipeline. CRM is a piece of enterprise software. There's about 500 billion pounds of enterprise software, which is more or less useless out there at the moment. And I actually think the CRM is being, if you look at Sprinkler, you look at Percolate, you look at some of the, what I would say is the marketing, enterprise marketing dashboards that are out there, it's like Star Wars. These enterprise softwares, they are geared to be used by everybody. and they are socially engaging, and they look and record every touch point across the organization and every interaction with the customer. So I think CRM is become a little bit siloed in its use, but it's a very capable tool if you open it up. You look at Salesforce.com and the new versions of it is a very capable tool, but the organizations, in terms of the operating model, don't use them in the right way.
Makes sense. Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, as you know, Marcus, I spent 3 years at British CRM Vendor Workbooks, and that is a CRM where our intention was it goes right across the business. But Nick, you nailed it on the head. You know, we had those conversations with people. You know, the real value you're going to get is if accounts are using it, and all this information is shared. So any touch with the customer is recorded. But you're absolutely right. It came down to but we'll look at that later, because the licenses. Where do we put it initially? Sales and marketing. That was typically where it was focused, and it was absolutely about honing down the license, because there's an ongoing cost to this thing, as opposed to looking the other way. No matter how we tried to sell the value, a lot of customers look at it as a cost and assess a necessary evil. And I think the whole CRM market, everyone I talk to, even now, it's a challenge, right? It's hard because people have got to use it. And I think my view, a lot of the CRMs are not intuitive enough and easy enough for people to put information in, so it becomes laborious. And it's the old adage, you know, rubbish in, rubbish out. If the stuff isn't going into that, it's great, I can look at it, and if someone hasn't put it in there, the worst thing is I don't know they haven't put it in, so I don't know what I don't know. So, you know, they're great tools, I agree with you, the power of these things, but it's people and process that often let them down. That's the challenge.
One of the really interesting questions, I always like to ask the question, how much money is being left on the table as a result of current behaviors? And from what I'm hearing, it sounds to me like the failure to engage all the different parts of the business starts at a cultural level. So it really has to start at the top of the organization. My suspicion is that because CRM will often be sold badly, it'll be sold into the sales and marketing director. IT will have an involvement, and it's not sold as a cultural change tool. Would that be a fair observation?
I think so. And I think it's got a stigma around it because of what we've seen. You mentioned I was involved with a team where we implemented Siebel and nearly killed our business way back. But I think there is a stigma whenever you talk to people about CRM. They've had an experience of something, and they've got this. It's hard, and it isn't easy. It isn't just flick a switch and off you go, because it does involve what do you want to store about a customer? How do you store it? What's your business process? How do we help use this tool to help you become more efficient, more informed, all the good stuff you want? It's about the outcome you want, not about the technology. And a lot of customers are looking about spending a lot of, you've mentioned IT being involved, focus on the technology. That's not what it's about. It's about what's the outcome you'd like to have? Would you like to be faster with customers, improve the momentum with your sales process, have everyone informed, as Nick said? And then working backwards, how do we achieve that? And then committing to whatever it takes to get there. Whereas a lot of people then will take that off because that's going to be too expensive.
Yeah.
And I think right from the beginning, if I can bring it back to, it's about new businesses. It's easier. Legacy businesses, put every obstacle in the way because you're putting the wheels on the bus while the bus is moving. And that's harder. So you make sacrifices and you divert things.
It's so interesting. One of the things that we always teach our clients is that no one buys what you think you sell. It's just a fallacy. You know, no one in the 13 years I've been doing this has ever bought sales training. They bought school fees. They bought protecting, being able to buy the house next door so they could increase the wall space for their art collection. I've had people buy my training because they didn't want to put their horse down and turn it into dog food, and they wanted it back up there, and it was going to cost them 50 grand in vets bills. Those are the real reasons why people buy. And I think when we're looking at these technologies, your point, Ian, is absolutely bang on the money. You know, what is it we want to achieve as a result of making this investment? How can we achieve it? And it keeps coming back to the people right at the top, trying to defer responsibility for these changes. I think one of the big lessons I'm taking away from today's debate is that so many organizations are stuck in their ways because the speed of the leader determines the speed of the group. They keep deferring responsibility into the silos within the organization where they think this stuff ought to be. And that falls firmly at the feet of the selling organization, who are calling too low, they're calling the wrong people, they're not having strategic conversations. And I think what this debate has really crystallized in my mind is how crucial it is that salespeople stop trying to sell product or their service. They start engaging at a strategic level. They're having cultural conversations about the customer's marketplace, the competition, the changing technologies that are available to enable them to do business. Nick, your thoughts?
I think we're coming back to the reason why CRM and all of these things we're debating is that the conventional operating models are struggling. They just are. They're typically hierarchical, they're typically functionally siloed, and the companies that are doing well out there, the WeWorks, the Alibabas, the Ubers, the what have you, and some of the more conventional, techie companies and IT services companies are all using growth models. And one of the issues we have is the nature of work itself has changed. The nature of how we define who does the work and who talks to the customer is changing. You can't you can't think of the engagement with the customer as the salesman does that, the account manager does that, the pre-sales person does that, the solution expert does that, and the accounts payable person does that. You've got to redefine that landscape. Smart companies now are thinking in terms of how do we create the demand? How do we capture and convert that demand? How do we revenue that demand, and how do we repeat revenue that demand? So when I create an operating model to do a sales growth piece, the first person I hire is not a salesman; it's a data analytics person who's going to look at the landscape of what we're dealing with. Because although the salesperson is one of the important hires, he's not the first hire. We need to make our decisions based around collecting all information across the entire organization. And the salesman needs to be plugged into that. We need to analyze what's going on out there, and we need to direct our sales and marketing teams around the data. It's not a gut feel industry anymore. That you can't get away with that. You've got to analyze every aspect of it and use it to build your go-to-market strategy.
Very good. Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I speak a lot on new technologies, and I've been talking a lot recently on, the technology you want as a business is virtually, I'd say in the majority, if not totally, available today in an affordable fashion. So there's no excuse for that. What's holding people back is the ability to and receptiveness to change. It's not what's about the tool. It used to be, I can't afford the tools of the big company. I can't do that. It's too difficult. Do you know what? You can innovate. There's so much available, richness available now to innovate and do things. A lot of free tools you can use if a business wants to get into doing some social selling. There's an incredible amount of stuff you can use for free. But the reason people aren't, I think, is it's hard. It feels hard. It's change. And I think that's the biggest barrier we've got. New innovators and disruptors this is all exciting, that there's no obstacles. It's how do we do this? How do we become something? And it's not just about change, it's about change and change again. You've got to be, this horrible word that's coined, but agile. You've got to be in your processes, your people, the roles, how they interact with customers, flexible and agile again and again and again. And I've seen lots of traditional business I've spoken to who may talk the talk, but it's not being endorsed and supported, particularly not from the business leadership. It's got to be supported right through the business, and not mouth that, we're going to do this, and look, we've got a website. And I've seen this, look, we've got a Twitter account, Nick, great. It's not about that. It's not about ticking boxes. It's about actually walking the walk of the reality of this stuff. And it is hard. I'm not going to say it's not. For a traditional business or an existing company, you may not have the right staff. I've worked with teams where They've said, how do we get the team there? And I've said, well, it may involve changing some or all of the team. You know, you can take on a journey, but you've got to be prepared to make some hard decisions in this new world.
This is one of the really interesting things as well, in terms of the sales team. Their fear of talking about how tough it is to implement, how crucial it is that they invest the time. One of the things I'm teaching my clients to do is say, to lead with a couple of objections. And one of the objections is, look, a lot of people will not do business with us because of the amount of time we insist you invest in onboarding our process or our system. If you don't do that, you may as well just put your money onto a bonfire and set it alight. Because what's going to happen is you're going to implement, you might not even implement the software. And 6 months down the road, when I phone you up for a customer service call, you're going to tell me you haven't uploaded it onto your system. Now, if you have uploaded it onto your system, you won't have trained your people. The people you have trained will only be using a fraction of the capability. And as a result of that, you're not going to be deriving the value that we've discussed that you need. And I think salespeople really need to develop some spine, because one of the big challenges here is having those difficult conversations with their prospects and their customers and tell people as it is. You know, this is tough. Moving over to a digital environment, you're going to have to invest a lot of time, money, and resource into the data, the analytics side of things, making sure that the organization is joined up, that we are looking at the customer experience and the customer journey. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to put something in that's going to just deliver a shoddy result. We're going to deliver something that delivers precisely what you've asked for and exactly what we've promised. And that takes real nerve for a lot of salespeople, because they're afraid that that's going to frighten people off. But I think that's a huge disservice if you don't do that. Yeah? I'm just spotting the time. I'm afraid we've almost reached our hour. Nick, would you like to summarize? You've probably got some final thoughts to share.
I think really that we're talking about the impact of digital on sales organizations and salespeople. So, you know, let's think about this. So, in an organization, if you're digitally engaged, it means everyone on the organization has to be a salesman. If you touch the customer journey in some point, they have to be tuned into what the customer journey looks like and what the experience they're looking for. So if they can just touch and help that customer journey to help the sale along or help them repeat business. So that means you do have to go beyond salesmen and make sure the rest of the organization is aware that they have a role to play in the customer journey. They have a role to play in helping this customer. You know, in a digital economy, you know, what's the ROI? It's a happy returning customer. You know, it's like getting a meeting with the CEO, isn't it? Most people can get a meeting once, but can you get back into their office again? You know, so happy returning customers. The next takeaway really is that if I'm a salesman in a digital world, I expect the organization to tell me and inform me and keep me informed of all the customer touch points, whether it's my prospect, whether it's a great account or whether it's on my pipeline. I expect the organization to be able to feed me as the pursuit leader, the opportunity leader, the sales leader or the salesperson. I expect them to tell me and give me the analytics about every piece of interaction with my customer. And I don't think organizations, to your point, Marcus, you have to invest in that. And that, if you don't invest in that, you can't compete in this digital age. You know, the companies that do invest in all of this stuff, and they are savvy around journeys and touch points and invest in all these tools and analytics, they're the ones that are going to move ahead of you. And you're going to struggle if you don't do it.
Excellent. Ian, your conclusions.
Sure, yeah. So I think we talked about the buyer's journey and the role of a salesperson today, and I think it's still evolving. But I think for any sales leaders or salespeople, not to ignore this new medium and the new tools around it, just because it feels hard or you don't know it, get involved, because it isn't going away. Your competition and other people are using it, and they're using it to their advantage. Just because you're not seeing it, you're not realizing what's going on. and it's not that difficult to do. I've self-taught in this stuff and taught other people, and often I get the little light go on where they're like, oh, because their perception was like anything new, it's going to be hard. You don't have to invest months of training in this. You can do some very simple things very quickly, and that'll get you going on your journey. And then you'll learn a little bit more. Twitter lists I mentioned. I didn't know about that at the beginning, and I came across it. Why didn't I find about it earlier? So you sort of and once you get into it, it becomes habitual, and then you can figure out how to get more clever at it, etc. But it absolutely is, as we've heard examples, makes a difference to the outcome you will get in terms of more interaction. And the hardest thing I see across all sales environments right now is, how do I get engaged with new customers?
Fair point.
So it helps.
At the heart of it, that's exactly why most of us are on here, considering this topic. So what I'd like to do is wrap up. First of all, Nick, thank you so much for your insight. Ian, the same. Really found today very interesting and very useful. If any of you would like to use LinkedIn more effectively, I've just put a link for a book that Sandler has published. LinkedIn is a customer of ours, and we've co-written this book in terms of developing a more effective use of that particular social medium. If I were you, I urge you to follow both Nick and Ian. Ian is one of the most influential people in social selling worldwide now. And Nick has a huge track record of helping companies to really develop their businesses, develop their sales, turn businesses around. And I urge you to follow them, follow the discussions they're having, because I'm guessing, given that the advice they've been doling out today, they will be tracking the hot topics. And if you feel the urge, please follow me as well, although there's probably more controversy and edge in what I have to say with less substance. Guys, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and look forward to the next debate. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.